Good afternoon from London. My name is David Newman. I'm your host today, chairing this session. I'm the Managing Director of the BBIA. And those of you who joined us on July the 10th will know that we had an hour and a half talking about how compostable packaging is made and what the applications are for it. And we looked at the various applications, and we had a retailer telling us why they adopted compostable packaging. And I know that you undisciplined lot listening all sent us in questions about, well, okay, well, what happens to them when people go to throw them away after they've used them? And I said to you, be patient. On July the 20th, that's what we'll be talking about. So here we are today with a stellar lineup of speakers who have been in the industry of treating, of making, producing and selling and treating compostable materials and compostable plastics, but also, of course, food and garden waste. And so I'm delighted to introduce these, the four speakers that you see on your screen. We'll be starting with Lucy Frankel from Vegware. Then we'll be talking with David Stowe from the Compost Bag Company. Grant Keenan of Keenan Recycling will be telling us how they handle their food and garden waste and their compostable packaging in their compost plants. And lastly, Jenny Grant, who is Head of Organics and Natural Capital at the REA, will talk to us about the overall system for organics recovery in the UK. And what I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is after each speaker have one question which I see on the Q&A that you're going to send me is the one that you most want that speaker to answer. And then at the end of the four presentations, we're going to go back to the panelists and fire away as many questions as we possibly can, with the aim of finishing in about 60 to 70 minutes. So if that is clear, and I hope it is, what I would ask the speakers to do is, apart from Lucy, you can now turn off your videos. Lucy should be turning on her audio and your video is on. I will get off and pass over to Lucy, who will tell us about Vegware and their operations here in the UK. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Now, I very much hope I can get the technology right. I'm going to hit share. I hope you can see my slides. Wonderful. So please shout if it's all gone wrong, because I can't see the presenters anymore. So please shout at me, David, if there's some sort of technical hit.
You're doing fine. Absolutely fine.
Marvellous. Thank you. So firstly, thank you very much to the BBIA and Futamura for bringing us together. This is a really excellent topic to focus on. We're seeing huge amounts of interest right now in exactly what people can do with compostable packaging. So Vegware has a lot of experience in this area, and so this is what I'd like to share with everyone today. Let's start off by clarifying a few things about standards and certification. So there's a couple of different standards that are very well known internationally. I'm looking at the standards here for defining how you, an item, is it suitable or not for industrial composting. There's some standards that people work to. So the main, the European one is EN 13432. And then in the US, they've got ASTM D6400. Those two standards are broadly equivalent, where they set out the different criteria that an item has to meet in order to be to meet the standards. So then you can go to a certification agency, and that is something that you have to pay to do, obviously per material or per product. And in Europe, the agencies working to the European standard, the main ones are DINCERTCO and TUV Austria, and you'll see those logos down on my slides there. It's very important, though, when you are looking at these certification logos, they have to have the little reference code underneath them. Without that, it's meaningless. It's not possible to trace it, and DINCERTCO, for example, get very cross if people use their seedling logo without the reference, because it has to be to about one specific product that you're referencing. And then on the other side of the screen, you can see in the US, they've got BPI, and there's also the CMA Compost Manufacturing Alliance that work to the US standard. So those are some of the logos that you might recognise and what they stand for. Vegware has a very wide range of products in a wide range of materials. Of course, we make sure that all of our products are suitable for commercial composting. But then, of course, labelling, as other speakers are going to touch upon as well, labelling is very important so that you can have everybody along all touch points recognise the product and help it get to the right bin. So we have got our green leaf band. This is a broad stripe in our design that we have been phasing into our products across all different materials and products, which is quite a job when you've got 370 or so products, but this is what we want to do. It's something that unifies our range, and then of course we work with our clients wherever we can to help people set up composting. And so then we have the same design that goes onto our posters, that goes onto our bin signage. You'll see that it's on our compostable bin liners as well. And so this is the thinking that we can have something unified that everybody all along the chain, from the people in catering who are handling the products, putting them out on the shelf of the chiller, right through to people choosing the right bin and then going through to waste operatives. That's the thinking behind it, try and make it look nice and joined up and nice and simple. And then that's how it looks in practice. So you'll see we've put it on a range of different products, and that's where we can print on the items. So that's what we've been doing. And the next phase in what we're up to at Vegware for our on-product labelling is that we are now phasing in the exact certification logos onto our products. So here's an example of our double wall cup that we're working on at the moment. We've just had the certification pass for Cray in Ireland, so we're incorporating that. That's that middle tick. So that's the new thing that we're going to be incorporating onto our products, and with the green band as well. So this is what we're aiming for. I wanted to go through the possibilities. What can happen to compostable packaging? There's lots of different methods, so I'm just going to have a whistle-stop tour of what those are. So first of all, I know Grant is going to be talking about this more because this is his real expertise, but in-vessel composting is the main method that is the most popular method, the most best suited method for treating compostables, and the standard EMR 3432 looks at a 12-week time frame, but in reality it's often quicker than that, and that's the main process we work with in the UK. There's a handful of wet anaerobic digestion plants that are able to process compostable packaging. Not most in the UK because of the way they're set up. Generally, wet AD is set up to process pure food waste only without other feedstocks. But there are different ways of approaching it. And in Italy, for example, they incorporate a composting phase, and there are a handful in the UK that have a specific setup that allows them to process compostables. Moving on, there's another form of anaerobic digestion. So there's still takes in a range of organic feedstocks, so it takes in food, and it can also take in garden waste and compostable packaging, and still creates gas. It's very common in mainland Europe, and there's a lot of people in the UK who are very interested in it. It's less widespread here, however. Moving on, then there's open windrow composting. This is how in the UK generally garden waste is treated in this way. There's actually there's no particular issue with compostable packaging itself breaking down in open windrow composting, but the thing in Europe is how animal byproducts are treated. So since foot and mouth, the UK has had these regs in place that mean that any catering waste that has food waste in it has to go to a hotter method that's going to eventually pasteurize the waste. So that's in-vessel composting or anaerobic digestion. So in the UK, food itself is not suitable for going to open windrow. Most vegware is going to be used with food. Therefore, this is not a major pathway for our products. However, in 2018, we worked together with REA.org, and the Environment Agency changed the subtleties around this and said that actually drinks waste that only has cream or milk residues on it is possible to go to these facilities. That's not a green light for every vegware cup to go through to a garden waste bin, because the facility has to say, yes, we want that, that's their choice, but it is physically possible for it to break down in those processes. Then there are on-site units. This can be a nice solution if a site has space. If it's somewhere in the state, it's got a bit of its own land, and they have people that can manage the waste themselves, because it can be quite hands-on, but it can be a really good solution, for example, at Dundee and Angus College. Not in the UK as yet, but in the world, it is possible for PLA, the clear plant-based alternative to conventional plastic. It can go to mechanical recycling. It is practiced in other countries. There's a couple of places I'm aware of, Belgium and the US, not widespread here in the UK, but it is physically possible. It is a possibility. So moving on, Vegware's approach, essentially it's joined up. We want to work throughout the chain. So that starts at making sure our products are compliant, they do work in composting. We invest hugely in certification. We work with the waste sector in trials. We work very closely with the composting sector. So we're delighted to be working very closely with the REA Organics. And then, of course, waste collectors. We want our waste to be able to go to the right kind of facilities. And so we work closely with collectors around the UK. And then, of course, the last step in the chain is our clients. We have to make sure that people can get the right behaviour change in place. So we help people with source segregation, behaviour change, bin signage, and all that jazz. Help them get it right. So this is where we are. We've been plugging away, trying to actively drive business access to commercial composting. In fact, I've got email trails with grants going back to 2010. So we've been plugging away. Aberdeen was indeed the first area of the UK where our products could get into a trade waste collection. So what I'm talking about here, this is commercial and industrial waste collections. I'm not talking about householders. This is a waste collection that will visit a business. So here we have, at present, we are, excuse my dog barking, we have 48 of the UK's largest towns and cities where trade waste collections are available for used vegware. So these are things that we've set up specifically with our products, and happily those 48 towns and cities represent 68% of the population of those 100 places. We have growth in the pipeline. We've got various plans that we are working on together with the waste sector. So you can see the growth trajectory just there. And here we are. Our list, do go to our website because it changes on a regular basis as we add new places. And so that's our list of the 48 towns and cities around the UK. And so you can refer to that on our website. I shan't read them all out, all 48 of them. There's also post-back services available anywhere in the UK. That's the best for a sort of a box full. If you have a box full of used vegware, then there are options for you to send that to an appropriate processing facility. We can put you in touch with those if you contact us. A little example here, I mentioned that we've been working together with Keenan's for a very long time. This is one of the newest partnerships that we have. It's together with Paper Round in London, Brighton and Sussex. And this has been something we've trialled together for the last year, looking at how source segregation can work in large offices, and it was a successful trial. So happily, we've been able to roll that out, and that's been there's been a lot of interest given that food service is moving to using a lot more disposables than previously because of the concerns around hygiene post-COVID. So there we go. That's my whistle-stop tour of all things composting. There's our web address and 2 email addresses if people would like to contact us to ask any questions. That's me done.
Well, Lucy, thank you. Thank you for respecting the time. Firstly, let me apologize to everybody that I didn't remind you this is the second in the series of webinars which Futamura and BBIA are putting on, and announcements regarding the third and the fourth after the summer break will be out shortly. Lucy, there's a few questions for you. I'll keep most of them to the end, but just quickly, most of your stuff is industrially composted, but not certified for home composting. Is that correct?
That is correct. So there are some materials that we work with that we know are absolutely definitely home compostable. So for example, we have bags made by Futamura, Natureflex, and that's absolutely definitely home compostable. Then we have our bio bags, our compostable food waste liners. Those are home compostable too. But for our other items, we don't want to claim that they are home compostable, because home composting is in the hands of every individual householder in the UK.
Sure, it's uncontrollable. Yeah, uncontrollable.
We don't know how good they are. We don't know if they're turning the mix. We don't know what we're putting in. And so we know that people who have managed their compost heaps well and have a good mix of green to brown and doing it really well and getting temperature nice and warm, there have been absolutely successes with veg-aware items, but you have to get the balance right, and because there's so many variables, we don't want to make any claims there. So that's why instead we focus on industrial compostability, because that's a whole profession, people who do it for a day job, and they are fantastic at it.
And as we will see, we have the plants. So we don't all have home composters, especially not on the 12th floor of a building in Canary Wharf where I am. So, but we do have food waste collections, and we do have plants that can take them. Okay, well, there's other questions for you, Lucy, that I'm going to keep back because I'm sure that some of the other speakers will talk to them around acceptability in biogas, and also around confusion with non-compostable things like non-compostable coffee cups. But we'll come back to those later. Now, thank you, Lucy. Stay online, but well done, turn off. And here is David Stowe from the Composting Bag Company. And David has got I'm almost going to say a lifetime experience, but perhaps a little bit less than a lifetime experience in managing food waste collection systems and the compostable bags used in them. Over to you, David.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to quickly have a look at where we've been, where we are now, and have some fun with the costs of the contamination that we still see. So compostable biopolymers, they really got going back in the 80s. By the turn of the century, with Mad Cow and BSE and all those things.
David, you want to share your slides with us, perhaps?
Sorry. But by the turn of the century, then the ABP regs all came in, and we had the very well established composting industry.
We're still not seeing your slides yet.
Sorry, hang on, what's it? Escape.
Yeah, let's get the slides up. Take your time, no hurry.
So what?
There we go. It's coming up now. Good. You're there. You're there. You're there. I think you need to put it onto full screen view, as you would if you were making any normal PowerPoint presentation. Down in the right-hand corner, that's it. Yeah.
Am I
There
getting
you
better?
go. You got it now. Okay. So want to go back to the start. There you go.
Yeah,
Over
no
to
worries.
you.
Yeah, so I was just saying where we're going to go with this talk. So by 2005, when I came along and got my boots nice and smelly with food waste, things like vessel composting, people like Biogen over at AD, it was a well-established industry even back then. By 2012-13, the industry looked a bit like this. It's a bigger industry now, but we have windrow composting capacity, 4 million tons a year, something like. For those new to organics, windrow composting is just a great big heap in a big field, composting away. In-vessel composting stood then at about, 1.8 million tons. That's basically composting, same again, but it's indoors, far more controlled. And allowed to take food wastes, animal byproducts. Around about then, the AD industry was a tiny bit smaller. Everything's much larger now. It stood at about 1.7. And don't forget home composting. We spoke about it a moment ago. Home composting, even back then, was 500,000 tons a year. There's a huge potential for home composting as an end-of-life disposal route, more of which later. So yeah, back in 2008-9, I was competing for local authority municipal bagged food wastes with people like Biogen, and the industry was ticking along nicely. A lot of government money came in, sort of skewed it all slightly, but let's ignore that and just have a quick look at contamination. A big issue with all recycling, isn't it? When you read around and speak to people, windrow and in-vessel composting, I get the feeling people are telling me it's at about 2%. That's on the high side. Sadly, local authority contracts very often stipulate until it gets to 5%, we don't want to talk about it. It's contractually allowable to take 5% by weight of contamination into an in-vessel or a windrow. Ridiculous amount. Thankfully, not the case. It's more like 1 or 2%. Now, the AED industry, and not the dry AED facilities, but certainly the wet AED facilities, a lot of them will be taking back of store supermarket wastes. One of the AED sites I've been to suggested by weight that can give you about 25% packaging. But other reports say far less, sort of 6 to 10%. So let's say 10% of what you bring in is contamination. Yeah, I've put compostables on the right-hand side there. My best guess for the entire capacity that the UK sees now in terms of compostables, compostable packaging, compostable bags, would reach about, I don't know, say 20,000 tons. Look at it, it's a drop in the ocean. Nobody would even notice it. So if the entire output of Lucy's company, my company, everybody doing compostables, if the whole lot was composted, the guys in the organic treatment industry wouldn't even notice it. But that's the point. So right now we're selling, I don't know, maybe 500,000 garden waste sacks a year for local authorities, 1 or 2 particular big cases, but for local authorities to take bagged garden waste straight to windrow composting. Now, when I was doing this presentation, I thought, well, okay, I need to speak to some windrow composters. It's been a while. And I drive past one every day on my way into work. So I had a John Cooper Recycling. I had a chat with John. He's very much the farmer. He tells it like it is. And I asked him, John, tell me about compostables. And he said this. Read that for yourself. More or less word for word with a Lancashire accent. Now, his point was, contamination isn't going away. It's been a baseline of 1 or 2% forever. And he just wishes that black plastic bags, carrier bags particularly, were all compostable. so that he just wouldn't have the issues that he has now. And as David Newman has told us all on numerous occasions, in Italy they would be. And John, who is a windrow composter, not an in-vessel composter, and so not that involved in compostables, he knows all this anyway. And he said, yeah, over on the continent, he would have far fewer problems with contamination if all of those plastic bags were compostable. Sadly, Westminster seems to keep sidelining compostables, and organisations like the BBIA are certainly fighting against that. But we missed some great tricks with the carrier bag tax, and next year we're going to see tax on plant-based plastics, which just feels a bit unfair. We need to start thinking in circles, and we need to start changing how it all looks. But a quick look at in-vessel composting today. Literally millions of compostable caddy liners will be being composted and digested as we speak right now. They look like that. That's one example of a really good example actually of a circular resource system. Organics, capturing organics and going back to organics, going back to soil. Yeah, and it's a big circle, but it works in smaller circles too. Lucy mentioned 2010, just before even that. The Manchester International Festival, 2009, very nice lady, worked with me on having all the catering companies on the site had to use compostable cutlery, crockery, bags. So all that food area, all the waste was all just swept into my green bins, and we composted the whole lot up at Tomberden. Absolutely no problem at all. Another example, I mean, if you think in circles, you create circles. A great example of a big retailer jumping in on this, and hello Ian, I notice you there, is the Co-op compostable carrier bag. So when other retailers are going in the wrong direction, Ian's driving with the Co-op towards, you can buy a compostable Co-op carrier bag, use it once to take your shopping home, use it again to keep all your food waste in it, and it composts away to nothing. It's fun to maybe think that, well, isn't it a shame that a six gram bag, 6 grams of plastic, can maybe stop so many grams of organic food waste from being composted or digested. It's just the wrong way to look at it. Anaerobic digestion right now. Well, right now, for example, in northeast Wales, I'll not rhyme off the local authorities, but we actually sell them compostable bags. They've been using compostable bags for several years, and taking them to their AD facility at Wine, run by Biogen, actually one of the industry's old guard. So they're using compostable bags, no problem at all. I'm told that they extract those, send them off to in-vessel composting, which Biogen runs themselves. Everything gets put straight to farmland. It's a fully circular system, and there is no microplastics left in the soil to worry about for future generations. Now, dry AD is perfectly matched to compostables, obviously. AD systems across Europe are perfectly matched and have developed to be very compatible with compostables, some superb examples. And the point is that they don't even notice compostables, they just vanish in the system, basically. Now, let's have a little bit of fun, because not all anaerobic digestion sites do what Biogen do in northeast Wales there. Let's picture this circle is a ton of food waste, bagged food waste, arriving at a AD site. Now, if it's a back of store waste, if it's from a supermarket, there's a lot of packaging in it. As I said earlier, up to 25% by weight is packaging once it's removed. But let's say, okay, let's be a bit easier. Let's say just 10% of that ton is in need of either landfill because it's very wet, doesn't burn well, or let's say it might go to energy from waste. It's still going to cost you an extra £10 a ton compared with a ton of food waste that hasn't got that packaging in it. Now here's the fun bit. The thin red line that you actually can't see there is the caddy liners. If those caddy liners are plastic caddy liners, chances are they're going to contaminate all the solids to the point at which the solids can't go out onto farmland either. So that big light green section, the 75% which is liquid, that will end up on farmland, no problem at all, and roughly 25%, isn't it? But all of those solids are now contaminated with little bits of plastic bag. That's going to cost you the £22.50 more than if you were using just ordinary compostable caddy liners. None of those costs would apply. So that's just a bit of fun to play with. Possibly more importantly, and something that I know Jenny will touch on later, you won't have contaminated that soil either. No microplastics in that soil from using a compostable bag, which is perhaps even more important than the financials here. So, obvious conclusions. I mean, yes, I've stated the blindingly obvious. Conclusions are that if you think in circles, you get circular resource systems going, like Ian did at the co-op. But don't get hung up on perfection. Yes, there are problems with householders identifying compostables and putting those out in the correct waste streams. Contamination is a big issue. I think maybe 2023 might change that when we're all doing the same sort of thing across the country. But right now, we haven't got perfection. Don't let chasing perfection get in the way of a perfectly good system. Design small systems like the Manchester International Festival, like Vegware, like I know Grant does, small systems that use compostables in a circular fashion. It's not rocket science. That's me.
Well, it's not rocket science, David, and if it were, it'd probably be a goddamn sight easier because we can go to Mars, but we can't sort out how to manage our waste. And I really can't get my head around it sometimes because it's all a question of money, isn't it? You know, so it's a question of where the cost sits, and everyone's trying to avoid the cost, you know. So the councils don't want the cost of doing better and better collections because the cost sits there. The AD plants don't want the cost of putting in a new machine which would pulp up their compostable packaging because the cost sits there. And meanwhile, the environment pays because the plastics and other pollutants go through the systems to soil and to water. So yeah, rocket science would be easier in a way. Just one quick question for you, David, and that is, how do plants distinguish, and perhaps we'll see this a bit later too with Grant, is how do they, if they're getting 95% compostable bin liners through, how do they distinguish the others that are contaminants, and how do they get them out? What do they do with them?
I don't think they would. I would have to check, but my interpretation of the Biogen plant over in northeast Wales there at Wine, they will achieve separation of the organics with the same sort of hammer mills, basically, isn't it? The same sort of depackages that other people will use. And all of that bag mulch is taken off and composted. Back in the day, RAP proved not only that the best systems provide compostable liners, the best systems provide the householder with caddy liners, but they also proved that using compostable bags tends to reduce the contamination. I used to do it myself. You bang on a door and you'll say to a householder, thanks very much, the crews had to reject this week. Have you seen these bags? What do you think it's made out of? Plastic? No, not plastic, compostable plastic. and you just use the specialness of them to drive contamination down. So I would argue, I would have to go and pry, wouldn't I? But I would argue that any waste stream with compostable bags in it will be far cleaner than all other waste streams that just leave it to the imagination.
Okay, thank you, David. We'll come on to other issues, many questions about compostable bags in AD and compostable packaging in AD, but we'll leave those for the panel towards the end, because I'm sure we're going to get many more similar questions. Meanwhile, David, thank you very much for that presentation, and thanks for sharing that experience. And now it's with pleasure that I would like to introduce Grant Keenan, because until now we've talked a lot about composting, but we actually haven't talked to anybody who does the composting. And Grant, you're up in Scotland as well. A very Scottish day with you, Jenny and Lucy, and welcome. And you're going to tell us about your composting facilities there at Keenan Recycling and how you handle composting materials. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, David. I'll just share my screen. Bear with me.
Yep, we can see that, Grant. You just want to put it on full screen.
Okay.
Yeah, put it on full screen mode. Put it on presentation mode.
That's it. Is that working? Can you see that?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm Grant Keenan, Managing Director of Keenan Recycling. I think just before I start my presentation, I'd just like to echo what David Stowe said there about compostable bags and the co-op really leading the way. If every supermarket did do that, then our industry would be a whole lot better for it. So what I'd like to do today is tell a little bit of about the company, what we do, our experience with compostable cups, good and bad opportunities and things that pose as a problem. I think we're in quite a rare position in that we run in-vessel composters, we have outdoor windrows, we run a UK-wide collection service, and we also run depackaging equipment and create biofuels. So we see every element of the processing chain. This is an example of one of our trucks. We run about 60 of these throughout the UK. And this is our in-vessel composting plant in Aberdeenshire. So a little bit of background about the company. We started in 2001. I noticed at that time that local authorities were all landfilling garden waste and thought, surely there's something better that can be done. So I approached them and said, look, rather than send it to landfill, why don't you send it to me? And I started, like most composters, with a very basic outdoor windrow system. Once we had all the garden waste in the northeast of Scotland, I thought, well, what about food waste? Nobody was recycling that at the time. So I went back to Aberdeen City Council and said, look, if we build a big plant, would you be interested in collecting food waste? So they agreed, managed to get some funding from Zero Waste Scotland, or RAP as they were at the time, 450,000, and we built the plant. So at that point, it was all local authority waste. So it was Aberdeen City Council, the Shire, Murray and Highland coming into the site. And then I thought, well, what about the commercial sector? Originally, I didn't, believe it or not, want to be a collection company. I didn't know anything about running vehicles and trucks and things like that. Probably no less now. So what happened was I went round every waste management company in Aberdeen and said, look, here's the plant. How about you guys collect food waste, bring it to us and we'll compost it. They all said, yeah, that's great. A year went by, nobody brought us anything. So we thought we're going to have to put a truck on the road and start ourselves. So fortunately, Aberdeen was booming at the time with oil. So this is 2009. And it's ironic that it was the oil companies that really helped us pioneer our partnership with Vegware. because a lot of it was about cost, and a lot of the individual restaurants and cafes were a bit slow, but the oil companies who were better funded, they had deeper pockets and had green teams and things like that. So they were quite keen to implement the vegware and food waste collections. So we were pushing it an open door, really. So we started off, we put in 1,100 bins, filled them full of compostable cups, took them back and ran them through the system. So we operate 12 mil particle size, 70 degrees for an hour, and it absolutely works fantastically well, especially if the material's wetter. The compostable cups help open up the airspace and things like that. I suppose the thing about the compostable cups is that when we had control at that time of a very simple geographical area, i.e. we collected the material and we processed it, then it was no problem at all. Everything worked extremely well. Difficulty was 2015, we expanded our collections into the central belt of Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh area, and we wanted to mirror what we were doing in Aberdeen, but we didn't have the facility, just the collection service. So we'd obviously partnered up with anaerobic digesters, and they were for the food waste, but unfortunately they didn't like the compostable cups because the depackaging equipment couldn't distinguish between the compostable cups and any contamination. And being a contractor and a lot of our work subcontracted, we were caught in the loop between businesses, big waste management companies who'd won contracts demanding that we took compostable cups, and the AD plant saying that that they didn't want them. So we're stuck with what do we do. So we basically were in that dilemma, and then we started thinking, well, could we just do compostable runs, put it in one of our bins? Because one of the things that was really kind of niggling us was a lot of the coffee shops and things like that, they were buying vegware cups, everybody thinking they're doing great, taking them away and then going in a landfill bin. So I think there needs to be a little bit more work done on a holistic approach to get those cups back and into the right bin. But I do think now with COVID and things like that, I think there's going to be a real surgence that people aren't going to want to keep reusing cups and things like that. So I think the compostable market will be great. And if there's enough compostable cups, then we can do compostable cup runs and get them to the right destination. It has been frustrating over the last few years, so we decided to take the bull by the horns and open our own facility just outside Glasgow, a place called Linwood. So one of the things that we're going to do there is mirroring the operation that we had in. So we use large food waste depackagers that you can just see on the bottom right there. They're superb machines. It's an Atrita, it's the biggest one that they do, and we've got one in Aberdeen as well. The way it works is you have a big hopper, material goes in there, there's a long shaft with paddles offset at an angle. They beat the material, and it's important that they beat it rather than shred it, so that you're not ending up with contamination throughout the biofuel. So basically, as they beat it, it sets up a vortex, and the packaging gets pulled through, goes out one end, and you have a screen size in the bottom, which is basically the liquid which goes into the tanker there. So we were meant to be operational before April. Obviously, COVID's hit, so it's knocked us back now. So we're aiming to open the doors end of August, beginning of September. But what this will allow us to do in Scotland is to really close the loop, and that all the vehicles that we run can come back to our facility, and we'll take the time to separate the compostable cups from the other waste streams and get them off to IVC, which is something that I think really needs a big push on. And all the liquidized food will go into one of our tankers that you see on the top right, and then we'll feed the anaerobic digestion plants. As we've expanded south, this is all the depots that we have now. We're out actively looking to try and mirror the success that we've had with Vegware in Scotland. So I will be speaking to David and Lucy and trying to find ways that we can partner with facilities in all these areas that can continue the good work that Vegware do. Because the last thing we want is cups ending up in landfill, which does, if our industry doesn't take care in doing what we're doing. We really want to all work together as an industry to prevent plastic going in landfill and ending up in the compost. I think if we all work together and everybody follows like Vegware's example, co-ops, try and get everything as compostable as we possibly can and get it into the right destination, which is the critical thing, then this is where we can be heading. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grant. And that leads very nicely into Jenny, talking about closing the loop and soil. But let me just ask you one question. You talk there about the packaging and the cups, but I may have missed it, but the food waste you're taking is coming to you in compostable bags, coming to you in plastic bags. How are you getting it?
Yeah, so it's a variety. It's basically three feedstock sources. So one is Aberdeen and Murray Council comes in, food waste and garden waste mixed in a brown bin together. That just goes straight through the shredder and into the system, and the food is in with the garden waste and it's composted. The other way is Aberdeenshire Council and Highland Council. Their collections from the households are done in a little compostable bag. So what we do there is we run that through the depackager with purely, all it is food waste in a compostable bag, so that we know that the food goes out one end into one of our tankers as liquid biofuel. The depackager separates the compostable bag, and that goes in the IBC. The third waste stream is from our own trucks. So because we've got so many vehicles, we've got the ability to split routes. So if we do compostable cups, we put that on a butcher's run, because we don't really want the compostable cup or the butcher's bones going near the food waste depackager. So that truck will come in, it'll go straight to IVC, and we do a package run. So we do all the supermarkets, co-ops and Morrisons, Sainsbury's, things like that. So we know that if that truck comes in, it just goes straight through the depackager, food waste out one end, and the packaging goes off for energy from waste.
Thank you, Grant. I've got several other questions that people have asked to follow up on, but I'll save them for the panel shortly after Jenny's presentation. Thank you for that, Grant. Jenny Grant.
Hi, David.
Two Grants. I'm getting confused here. I was thinking, was I calling Grant and Jenny Grant, or what's going on here? Jenny Grant. Jenny Grant is the head of organics and natural capital at the REA, and try and give us 10-15 minutes, Jenny, on big picture systems.
Sure.
Thanks.
Can you see my slides okay, David?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I can see. You have to put them onto the presentation mode, because we can see them on the presenter mode as before, yeah?
Let me just, I don't know why it does that. Is that
there
better?
you go. That's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Well, thanks very much for having me. As David said, I'm Jenny Grant. I'm the head of organics and natural capital at the REA. We're a UK trade association representing renewable energy and clean technology, and we've got lots of members who are operating composting sites and AD sites. So I thought I'd start just doing a bit of a sort of big picture, sort of trying to bring it all together from the other presentations. And I love this quote: it's, despite all our accomplishments, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. So it's really all about our soil. It's about protecting our natural capital, make sure we're able to produce healthy food. And, you know, if I want to talk about the benefits of organics recycling, you know, I could probably talk to you for the rest of the day, you know, a webinar in itself about all the benefits of organics recycling. But really, just briefly, it's, you know, recycling organic waste, food waste, garden waste through composting and AD is definitely the best environmental option to treat the waste. It's much better than landfill, as Grant mentioned. You know, reduces the greenhouse gas emissions from the material, reduces pollution. When we're talking about anaerobic digestion, obviously it's a brilliant source of energy, renewable heat, power and gas, and all the things that you can do with that. But it's really the end products that really we're looking at today, you know, where compostables can influence the process. You know, the composting and anaerobic digestion produces really valuable end products, soil improvers and biofertilizers. There's been tons of work done over the years sort of demonstrating the safety and looking at the benefits. And compost and digestate can both increase crop yields, no negative impacts on the crop quality or safety. Digestate is a brilliant source of readily available nutrients, and compost is a bit different. It's really good at increasing the soil organic matter more quickly than other organic materials. It's a really important reservoir of carbon. It can store more carbon than atmospheric and terrestrial vegetation combined. And it can really improve the soil structure, so it helps reducing erosion, it maintains soil tilth, acts as a nutrient bank. And applying compost to soil over a number of years has shown to increase the soil microbial biomass, microbial activity, and build up a nutrient pool for plant nutrients. So really brilliant stuff. So it's really important that we get it right. Obviously, there's huge benefits to using compostable materials in various applications. I think, you know, we focused a bit today on liners, and definitely, you know, there's a reduced yuck factor I've sort of put here, the fact that householders are more likely to participate in food waste collections when liners are used. I think David mentioned earlier, there's been a number of studies done where actually when using compostable liners versus plastic liners, there's actually less contamination within the bag itself. And obviously there's cost savings that can be realised when these materials are actually biodegraded rather than removing any non-compostables and then having to dispose of separately. There's also other applications that they can be used, food contact applications where sometimes the food residues can be difficult to remove from the packaging, or, you know, where the item would be a small format, so things like sweetie wrappers would be very difficult to separate in a recycling process. So there's lots of instances where compostable really makes sense and would be a huge benefit. Also, if the compostables and the food were going, you know, to the appropriate treatment facility, then actually the recycling stream, the dry recycling stream, can be a lot cleaner, so can really boost their recycling rates. I think compostables represents a lot of opportunities for the organics recycling industry. They can certainly help reduce contamination, and we've heard about contamination, I think, from everyone this afternoon, sorry. You know, contamination, we estimate, you know, probably a fairly conservative estimate that it costs the industry about £7 million a year. And obviously compostables could reduce this. It's likely that we're going to see over the next year or so tighter limits for feedstocks delivered to compost and AD sites. So the Environment Agency in the UK are looking at reviewing standard and bespoke permits, and they're going to probably work towards introducing a reduced limit for material biowaste delivered to sites. And they're also looking at the end product standards, so what's known as the quality protocols in the UK, which control the quality of compost and digestate. They're probably going to go under revision and likely to be looking at potentially tighter physical contaminants limits in the compost and digestate. Actually, in Scotland, Scottish Environment Agency have already introduced a tighter limit, so I think, you know, the rest of the UK may well follow suit. The resources and waste strategy is coming. We're expecting the next round of consultations. They're going to introduce mandatory food waste collections from 2023 for England, and they definitely represent an opportunity as well. the DEFRA were looking at whether central government funding could be provided to enable local authorities or to cover the costs of local authorities supplying householders with compostable liners. So you know, that would be a brilliant thing if it could happen. In terms of the packaging tax, I think David mentioned earlier, BBIA and REA are certainly seeking an exemption from the tax for compostable plastics that contain at least 30% of a bio-based content. And EPR represents a big opportunity as well, because there's potential for more appropriate inclusion within the system of compostable packaging and non-packaging items. So actually sites could actually receive an income for biodegrading them. So, you know, compost and AD sites could effectively be paid for treating these materials. Obviously, there's lots of things we have to do in terms of making sure that the system works. Not rocket science, as we said, but, you know, still various challenges, I think. Lucy's already covered pretty well, you know, the importance of how to recognise them, making sure they're clearly labelled. There's various different certification marks, and I know there's work undergoing at the moment to develop a more consistent look for compostable bags and liners, really to make identification easy, because that's one of the things that we hear on a regular basis. I think education and communication and guidance is really important as well, so that people know what to do with them, how to treat them. RAP have developed some guidance in the past, and they've got information that we use on bin stickers and things, but it's really important that local authorities are properly funded to enable them to deliver effective communications. I think we've seen time and time again that communications is the key to making a collection campaign successful, so it's really important that we have that. Lucy and David have touched on collections. I think we've heard about some great examples today about where, you know, we can make sure that these materials get to the right place. I won't go over that. I know there's been a lot happened in the past on that. In terms of processing capacity, David mentioned it earlier, we have got a lot of facilities in the UK that are approved to treat food waste. So we've got 112 AD sites, 48 composting sites. And as Lucy mentioned, that, you know, there is potential for some open window composting sites that could compost those cups and lids, sort of materials that have only been in contact with milk or cream, and there's about 300 of them. So there's infrastructure out there that could process it. One of the things that members often ask me is, you know, do they work? Do they perform as they should? And I think we can say that yes, they do. There's a couple of acceptable standards Lucy mentioned earlier, EN 13432, which is probably the most well-known one. And that's where the materials undergo rigorous testing to make sure that they disintegrate at least 90% within three months, and complete biodegradation to 90% within 6 months. And there's various other tests in there about ecotoxicity, looking at plant growth, limits on potentially toxic elements within the materials, making sure they don't have any negative effects. And it's an independent certification, like Lucy mentioned. And we've got lots of experience of processing these. So as Grant mentioned, you know, he's been doing it for a number of years in Aberdeenshire, composting these materials. It's happened elsewhere as well. The Scottish Environment Agency did a report last year looking at plastics in food waste, and actually there was no reports in that from talking to all the composters of any issues with bags and liners, compostable bags and liners. The number of trials that have been done, so we did a trial a couple of years ago with Biogen, where we took food waste with compostable plates, cutlery and packaging, mixed it with garden waste at a ratio of about 1:10, and treated it through an in-vessel composting process, followed by an open window process for a total of 62 days, so about 9 weeks. And there was no discernible compostable materials found in the screened product. I know there's trials ongoing at the moment, and David mentioned, I think, some of the Severn Trent work, looking at a pre-treatment process to take compostables through the AD, a pre-treatment before it goes into AD. So certainly happy to report back on that once we've got some more results from the work they're doing. And there's lots of experience from other countries. David's a fan of or knows the Italian system very well. I was there last year on a study tour what they're doing there, you know, is amazing. They've got all their carrier bags, all their fruit and veg bags are compostable. The bio-waste, most sites, most places, it goes to AD and then a subsequent composting step. So sometimes the compostables are removed at the front end and go straight to composting, but in some cases they also go through the digestion process. And actually they've reported that the liners completely break down within the digestion process itself, so within about a 30-day process. I think they have very different economics over there, different gate fees compared to what happens in the UK, but it's technically possible. So I think, like we mentioned earlier, you know, ultimately it usually comes down to money, but nothing is impossible. And I think if we bear in mind that original objective of protecting our soil, you know, there's no greater, we can't put a price on that, because, you know, without soil we're all totally stuffed. So I think compostables plays a really important role in that big picture of getting it right. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. And let me just add that last week, the Italian equivalent of RIA sent around their 2-year analysis of the amount of contamination in food waste collections in Italy. Now, in Italy, they have around about 6 million tons of food waste and a couple of million tons of garden waste going into AD and composting. And their calculation is that despite the obligation of using compostable bags, whether they go to AD or whether they go to composting, they're still getting about 3 to 5% illegal plastic bags. But also, people are not perfect, are they? They throw in the yogurt pot and, you know, it gets mixed up and people are not perfect. So you've got some contamination all the time. Now, they estimated that the cost to the compost and AD industry in Italy is between 90 and 120 million euro to extract just that 5% contamination which they have. And that's because, of course, the volumes that they have are so large, 6 million tons. So here we are at the moment in the UK, we're still sort of fiddling around with a very small amount of food waste. And you're talking about 7 or so million pounds of cost of contamination. But, you know, if you were to grow to that 5 or 6 million tons in Italy, you know, with the present system, you're looking at tens of millions of pounds of costs of decontamination.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shouldn't be there in the first place. And, you know, as I said, that 7 million is a very conservative estimate, because it's always very difficult to get good figures. And, you know, we've got some members that have given us figures that are a lot higher, but, you know, we can never be certain that that's a fair representation of the whole of the industry. So yeah, I completely agree. It's a massive cost, and you know, I think if we spent more focus getting it right, you know, upstream, then these plants wouldn't have that cost burden, and we'd have a cleaner process and cleaner products.
Yes, I agree with you, of course. Thank you, Jenny. Now I'm going to come back to you, but I would like all the panelists, please, now to turn on their videos so that they're on screen. There's Lucy, there's David, and Grant. Thank you all for being back. Now, I have really a whole series of questions here from several people who have identified themselves and others who haven't identified themselves about the role of compostables in anaerobic digestion. And of course, these are mostly UK inquiries, because of course in some other countries, as we've said, in Italy, but also elsewhere, we don't have these issues. And they're asking how sure can we be that bin liners will break down in anaerobic digestion? Isn't all your compostable packaging, Lucy, stripped out if it goes to an AD plant and doesn't get composted at all? David, if your food waste is being collected and going to an AD plant, aren't compostable bags stripped out? So what's the point of them? And another one, maybe for you, Jenny, is do we need a certification standard for the digestibility in a 20-day process of an AD plant rather than the compostability of bin liners? So I throw all those questions out to you because they are mainly around the AD process. And as I said, mainly relative to the UK, which is where most of our food waste goes at the moment, to AD. Maybe Jenny, you would like to start off and then others intervene?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think a standard would be ideal if we had a standard to prove things were digestible. Standards take a considerable time to develop, let alone actually if the material would achieve it. From what I've heard from other countries is that certainly the bags and liners do break down in the digestion process. Probably less of an issue in some other countries where they have a post-composting phase of the digestate, which we don't have here. But I guess I would say is if there were any remnants present in the digestate after the digestion process, presumably they would either be removed at a screening point like any remnants of plastics would be, so they wouldn't be present in the digestate, or if they did manage to get through a screen, then they would probably be preferable. They definitely would be preferable in terms of applying to soil for the any fragments in there to be compostable and continue to biodegrade in the soil, which I know the Environment Agency are not a fan of relying on. But in terms of actual environmental impact, compostables are obviously a lot better than plastics. And I guess it's comparing what we're at now rather than where we would be in an ideal scenario. Obviously an ideal scenario is zero plastics or of any type to land, but actually would be better to have compostables than plastics that are going to persist in the environment.
Yeah, well, we're already seeing some hundreds of thousands of tons of plastic fragments going to soil here in the UK, so we've got to get our heads around this and sort it out very quickly before it becomes irremediable environmental problem. David, Grant, Lucy, did you want to throw in any comments, please?
Jenny's pretty much answered the point that you asked me to have a quick think of. If you have a depackaging system, it's never going to be perfect. As you've just mentioned, an awful lot of plastics is still ending up on farmland. If those plastics are bioplastics, compostable plastics, they will not be there for very long. If they're polyethylene, they're going to be there for 500-600 years. And yeah, if you're extracting the compostable bags from the biomass, from the food waste, and sending that off to investable composting instead of AD, then it's still all going back onto farmland. We're not losing any organics. Whereas, David, you'll have lots of examples near London, over in Holland and the whole of Italy. If you actually leave it all in there and compost it at the end, everything goes through.
Yeah, if I could maybe just, can you hear me okay? Am I coming through okay? Yeah. If I could maybe just add to that as well, something that David said earlier about, I think in restaurants and hotels, when people see the green compostable bag, it keeps the feedstock cleaner. If you collect food waste in a black bin liner, then it just sends a message of what's the point in keeping plastic out if it's in plastic. The local authority one is a particular bugbear of mine in terms of how local authorities collect food waste. There is no doubt about it that there are local authorities that go to the expense of collecting food waste in a compostable bag, and it goes to certain AD plants, gets thrown into the plastic, and the whole lot gets landfilled or goes to energy from waste. And that is just wrong, in my opinion. And the other one is if you collect it in a plastic bag with food waste, if your feedstock is food and plastic, then it's no wonder that you're going to get some food waste in, some plastic in the digestate. I think really for food waste should be collected in compostable bags, and if it goes to an AD plant, I think the AD operator really needs to make an effort to keep it separate and get it off to IVC to have it composted properly.
Yeah, which is what they do in many European countries, Grant. Lucy, did you want to chip in?
I did, yes. Just to answer some of the questions that we've had that are relevant to me. people have asked what happens to the remnants removed by screening during AD. On the whole, that will go to disposal, and the UK uses a lot of incineration, and then landfill's the other option. If one of our items can't get to commercial composting, if it ends up in general residual waste, then there's still the benefits of choosing renewable materials. So yes, we go to a huge amount of effort to help our products to get to commercial composting, which is what we'd like. It's not going to be possible in every single case, and in that there's still the benefits of using renewable materials, low carbon materials, a lot of recycled and reclaimed content. If PLA goes to incineration, then it still has a calorific value, it still creates energy, and so it creates more energy in incineration than food waste, than wood or newspaper, and there's a benefit as compared to conventional plastics in that there's no volatile gases that come off in that process. So yes, it's right down the bottom of the waste hierarchy. It's not what we're aiming for, but at least there's some reassurance there. Somebody else asked earlier on about what happens, how do PLA-lined cups interact with traditional mechanical cup recycling. We have been in contact with the three big reprocessors of PE-lined cups in the UK. Unfortunately, one of the three does, and the other two does not accept PLA-lined cups. So of course we use fibre, which fibre recovery wants the fibre, but the question is what their processes are set up for, what materials they're expecting, and then what they do with those materials. So one of the big three does accept our PLA-lined cups, and there is a post-back option that we can introduce people to send our cups straight to that facility. But given that not every one of those reprocessors do accept our cups, it's complicated. That's why we've got this whole network of different collectors that we know are taken to the right facilities. In the same way, my colleagues in the environmental team can set people up with the right route to get to the right facility, and that might be a composter, or maybe it will be one of the.
Lucy, let me stop you there, but not because I don't want to hear you anymore, because we're running out of time. But let me also say that's why the government has issued this resource and waste strategy consultation last year, and a new consultation will be following up in the next couple of months to look at the consistency of collections of various waste streams across the UK, well, mainly across England, because we focus and beat ourselves up about compostables, but of course, as Grant will know because he's handling other wastes, every waste stream has its problems of contamination, cross-contamination, of stuff being put in the wrong place, and of often low recycling levels. And compostables can substitute quite a lot of plastic films. Well, plastic film recycling today in the UK is less than 4%. And we've had plastic films for the last 60 or 70 years. So obviously the whole system is a bit cranky, isn't it? And it's creaking at the edges, and all needs to be looked at. And compostables fit in, as we said on July the 10th in our webinar, in some of those applications. I will go back to you all now just for one last comment. Where would you, we asked this question, I think, Jenny, in your webinar with CIWM, and Grant, you answered it already. If you are making or treating and collecting compostables and food waste, do you see a bright future for this? Or do you think that this is a sector which is something that you would possibly not invest your own money in? Quick round the loop, starting maybe with Lucy, and then David and Grant, and back to Jenny.
Thank you, David. I spend a lot of my own time doing just this. I absolutely think it's well worth it. We've been plugging away at this very subject for longer than most people in the packaging sector. In the last few years, we've seen a real sea change people really want to find a genuine, local, UK, sensible, robust recycling solution. They know now that composting is a form of recycling. It's on a par with mechanical recycling. It stays here in the country, does not have to get exported. And so there's a real appetite for domestic solutions. The waste sector is very forward-thinking and coming to us. So we're really excited at the moment at the opportunities for the whole chain of stakeholders to work together. So yes, very, very encouraged and very exciting times.
Mm. Well, I wouldn't have asked you the question if you said no. Of course, but I didn't. For the audience, we didn't set this up before, so I don't think Lucy was actually waiting for that question. David, your take.
I'm very, very enthusiastic about 2023 onwards. Having banged on doors and tried to sell recycling to people, it was like pulling teeth. But we're facing a utopian situation where the whole of England is going to be doing the same thing. Now that means we can have whole of England communications, and we can tell everybody, right, this goes in that bin with a green sticker on it, or the green lid, or the green, we can standardize our communications across the whole country, tell everybody, get everyone fired up. Yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about harmonization of bin culture.
And Grant, you must see a big opportunity that with food waste collections coming across the UK.
Yeah, I do. I think if you look at the organic sector and what COVID has done, it's really shone a light on everybody's business model right across the planet. So I think if you're just doing garden waste and nothing else, I would advise to diversify into other things so that you're not caught if the recycling centres close and there's a second wave. But you're right, David, we've bet everything on 2023 legislation happening. We've employed a lot of people, we've bought a lot of trucks, we've opened a lot of depots. So I think everything will really hinge on the 2023 regulations. If that does come into play, then it'll be a very bright place indeed. If it doesn't, I think it's going to be a bit of a slow drag, if I'm honest.
Thank you, Grant. And Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's huge opportunities for the organics recycling sector. I think there's a couple of things we need. We need certainty of policy, I think, which was highlighted in our other webinar, which, like David and Grant have just said, we need to be sure that, the regs are coming and that they will go forward as planned. And I think we need education and communication, because without that, a lot of these things will fall down. I think it's been proven time over again and again that actually, we need to make sure that we're properly communicating things. And I know local authorities have really struggled in the past with budgets for that sort of thing. So I think if we get those two things right, absolutely, it's a really positive future for the industry. And I think compostables, they're not the answer to everything, but absolutely, they're a really important part, and they would solve a lot of our members' problems in terms of contamination issues.
Sure, thank you. Absolutely, they are not a solution to everything, and I really, want as the managing director of BBIA to say this very clearly, that compostable packaging is a niche market. It's a niche use, and that use is around where we can decontaminate food waste and get food waste back to soil cleanly, because we desperately need organic carbon back to soil, and using your compostable bags and bin liners and packaging is one way you can do that. But please, no compostable water bottles, no compostable milk bottles, no compostable fruit juice bottles. Please, let's keep it to where we can add value to food waste and food waste collections. Now, two last communications. Firstly, the recording of these proceedings will be online in the next few days. And with your permission, speakers, your presentations will also be put online for everybody to go and consult. And if you have any specific questions that you think we haven't answered, well, I'm David Newman at the BBIA, and going through the website there, you can get to me, and I will do my best to make sure that either I or the other speakers answer those questions for you. And lastly, this is the second of a series of webinars which Futamura and BBIA are putting on together. And after the summer break, we will be talking about communications and labeling. And we will be talking about government policies and how they've been implemented in various parts of the world and how we would like them to look in the UK going forward and looking at that 2023 horizon which we have in front of us. So be with us and keep an eye out for our communications for after the summer, and be with us then for that particular webinar. Thank you all. Thank you, Grant, David, Jenny and Lucy for being with us. And thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in, and to our friends at Resource Media for having organized this. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.